Hello to all our esteemed English-speaking auditory. My name is Zaporizhzhia. I'm a Ukrainian journalist, and I invite all of you, dear listeners, to watch this latest update on Ukrainian battle map situation as of September the 18th. So don't forget to like this video, leave your comments below it, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Don't waste your time. I won't be wasting your time, and I will be starting observing the battle map situation right now. So let's begin. As usual, we use the Deep State Map resource to show all the events taking place on the front line. And I'll start with the words of a classic, a celebrated Ukrainian writer, a renowned master of crafting truly outstanding winged phrases with a sharp tongue. However, I will skip the sharp words and instead replace them with more fitting and appropriate ones, in order to describe the very serious situation that is currently unfolding at the front. I'll quote Les Podrobiansky. Things aren't exactly bad for us, but you can't really say they're good either. That's more or less how our situation at the front can be described, because things aren't exactly the worst for us. It does seem like the enemy's rate of advance is actually slowing down. Indeed, in some places, the enemy is running into the wall of our organized defense. It's true, there are quite a few such areas. Take Pokrovsk, for example, where near Dobropilya, for the first time since the full-scale invasion, the pincers of the Russian troops are being cut off. The same goes for Sumy, which we managed to defend. Now it is returning to the state border. In some locations, our servicemen are returning, not everywhere, not completely, but they are coming back. So there are some positive signs, and there are, let's say, reinforced concrete areas where the defense is holding strong. And there are areas where, well, to be objective, we have serious problems. And the situation in Kupiansk is bad for us. The situation is bad, even though all those episodes of the so-called pipe wars were actually stopped. But there is a whole set of problems that has developed there recently, and this set of problems has now, in fact, led to the situation where Kupiansk, here you can see its administrative boundaries. So within these administrative boundaries, particularly already in the north and northwest of the city, the enemy has broken through, you could say. The enemy has seeped in, infiltrated deep into the settlement. I saw yesterday, I came across resources, Telegram channels that wrote that it was 150 enemy personnel. Well, I don't have that kind of information. I know that these enemy groups are scattered and their numbers are smaller, but still quite significant. Smaller than 150, but still quite large. The fact that the enemy is now breaking through in some places to the central part of Kupiansk, you can see that the gray zone now reaches the central part of Kupiansk, because that's exactly where some enemy groups have already been recorded. This is serious. These are not just some local skirmishes on the outskirts. These are already battles within the settlement itself. And I'm afraid to say this is not a forecast, God forbid, but it's a matter of us risking the loss of a city that became a symbol of our resilience in 2022, because Kupiansk, in essence, became the crowning achievement of the counter-offensive operation by the defense forces in 2022. Kupiansk, Izium, Balaklia, and now to lose it would mean losing a great deal. In terms of symbolism, and we are facing risks, and this needs to be discussed openly in order to assess the situation with a cool head, because the enemy is now putting pressure on the private sector in the northern part of the city. The situation cannot be described as completely stable and under control. Fighting continues in the city, and our UAV operators are now working in very difficult conditions, driving the enemy out, tracking them down bit by bit, wherever they can find them, taking out these groups. For example, this is what footage of enemy groups being taken out by the 19th Special Operations Center looks like. The work of strike UAVs over Kupiansk is, well, just imagine, if we're talking about large-scale enemy groups, numerically significant enemy groups, they've spread out across the city, across such a large city as Kupiansk. And that was the enemy's goal, to get into some populated areas. Kupiansk essentially becomes the first settlement among all the eastern districts that the enemy manages to enter. Their objectives include Lyman, Sieverodonetsk, Kostiantinivka, Dobropilya, Druzhkivka, Pokrovsk, and Mirnohrad. Out of all these cities, nowhere has the enemy managed to penetrate as deeply, both in terms of numbers and depth, as they have in Kupiansk, where the situation is still ongoing. The situation is actually pretty dire. That doesn't mean it can't be fixed, it doesn't, but it is extremely, extremely difficult. Kupiansk is not just a symbol Kupiansk is also about logistics and the railway, because the Russians are very eager to capture Kupiansk, and especially Kupiansk-Vuzlovi in this area, which is south of Kupiansk itself. Here is Kupiansk-Vuzlovi. They want to capture this agglomeration in order to restore their railway connection with the northern regions, with the northern railway from Valuiki, an extremely important railway hub of the Russian Federation in Rostov. Oh, sorry, not in Rostov, in the Belgorod region. So they want to restore this branch line. Kupiansk is the junction of the Kharkiv and Donetsk directions on our side. That's why, yes, these problems need to be called by their proper names. The enemy is breaking into the city, and this is a big problem. This is a very, very big problem. But the final result will not be determined by who takes flashy photos somewhere near the city council and poses with the tricolor, but by who ultimately manages to hold this city in the long run. The situation here is currently truly extremely difficult due to the enemy's breakthrough into Kupiansk. Moreover, the enemy is now attacking Kupiansk, not only striking from the right bank of the Oskill River, that is from this area, which now seems and is considered by us to be the most dangerous at this point, but the enemy is also attacking the left bank of the Oskill River, where there had been a lull for a long time. In particular, we are talking about the areas of Stepova Novoselivka. Here is a village near Pishchane on the left bank of our Oskill bridgehead, which is being held, and for a very long time there hasn't been any significant activity from the enemy here. Now the Russians are expanding the gray zone here deeper to the northwest from Stepova Novoselivka, that is right here, and they are trying to gain a foothold in the area to entrench themselves in order to push out the defense forces. This is a renewal of enemy activity after a long period of time. Before this, these were just words, scare stories in the reports of Russian war correspondents, but now it has turned into real attempts to gain a foothold. At the moment, all these attempts have been unsuccessful. But the very fact that there is movement after a long period of silence is already a signal that the enemy will try to find gaps in our defense here and, so to speak, exert pressure on the entire left bank Oskill bridgehead that is on this area, on the city of Kupiansk itself, I think it is quite likely that in the near future we can also expect attempts by the enemy to advance further towards Kivsharivka from their established presence in Senkove and Zarizove. Although there is nothing alive left anymore, so to speak. In principle, there are no prospects for the enemy to advance there. Therefore, there may be less concern about this area. But overall, the activity in the Kharkiv region leads me to think that this direction is precisely one of the two active ones the president is talking about, that we can expect to withstand very, very serious pressure from the enemy in the next phase of their offensive actions, meaning Kharkiv and Donbas, Kharkiv region and Donbas. In my understanding, this is exactly what it will be. Although I do not rule out that there could still be serious fighting in the Zaporizhzhia region, where the enemy was ultimately unable to carry out such offensive actions during the summer offensive campaign. Well, we'll get to Zaporizhzhia a bit later. Let's talk about the Kharkiv region. An interesting fact which was shared by the soldiers of the 57th Motorized Infantry Brigade.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
As far as I know, I haven't verified this information, but for quite a long time, the 57th Brigade has been holding Vovchansk. So if this is the case, then this information is actually coming from this location, actually. A video featuring a captured Kenyan citizen appeared on the YouTube channel of the 57th Kostya Gordienko Motorized Infantry Brigade, Kenya. I'll just show you a screenshot of it now. It's not important. This person gave our fighters the right to film him. No one is making fun of him. He is basically in the status of a person deceived by the Russian Federation. I want to emphasize this. That's why I want to tell the story of this man whose name is Evans. He is telling his story right now. Well, maybe he's lying, of course, but he tells this story that he came to the Russian Federation as a tourist and was deceitfully sent to war. He is Kenyan. His name is Evans. He has a 16-year-old daughter at home. He planned to stay in Russia for 2 weeks as a tourist, and supposedly, while he was there as a tourist, he was offered a job. The man signed some documents saying they were written in Russian. He didn't know he was signing a military contract. Okay, let's believe that. After that, his phone and passport were taken away, and he was brought to a military camp. He trained there for only a week. After that, he was assigned to an assault unit. He tried to escape from the front. He walked for 2 days toward the defense forces' positions to surrender. He was afraid to return to the Russians because they threatened everyone with death for refusing to go on assaults. And so after 2 days of walking toward Ukrainian positions, he surrendered. Here you could say he deserves some credit for this, for deciding on his own voluntarily to surrender when he realized the dire situation he was in. Whether he went to war voluntarily or not, whether he signed the documents knowingly or unknowingly, whether he realized it was a contract, I don't know for sure. But now he claims that he is ready to be exchanged to any country except Russia because he is fighting for his life. This is an interesting example of how the Russians, well, this isn't even recruitment anymore, it's outright deception, are sending anyone they can. And these aren't even mercenaries. I don't even know what to call the people they're sending here to fight, including in the Kharkiv region. By the way, in Vovchansk and these areas, it's not the first time that very diverse, let's say, categories of people have ended up being captured. Their presence has been recorded in Zaporizhzhia and in Vovchansk. It seems as if these places serve as some kind of training grounds for the Russian Federation. And actually, Zaporizhzhia, I just mentioned it in passing. Let's talk about it. The reason I say that I might skip it today, basically, is because of Donbass. So today's overview won't be very long. I'm skipping Donbass because the situation there doesn't yet require public disclosure. It doesn't require it. When the time comes, let's say, when it's worth talking about, then we will talk about it. For now, let's discuss those additional directions that may emerge during the latest active combat operations. Accordingly, Zaporizhzhia region. We must not forget that the occupiers have big ambitions for Stepnohirsk. The fact that there is no news about this area does not mean that active combat is not taking place here. Assault regiments are operating here, the 210th and 33rd Assault Regiments, holding back the occupiers from attempting to advance from the south, from the area of Kupiansk and Plavny towards Stepnohirsk. Although, let's say, this arrow is not their main direction of movement. Mainly the Russians are trying to break into Stepnohirsk through Primorsk. Primorsk is this village to the north. It has a very interesting administrative structure. It seems like it is very far from the area where the current line of combat contact runs. But if we enter on the map and type Primorsk, you'll see that it's a very interesting, very long, stretched out village that has a kind of curve on its southern outskirts, right in this area. And it's precisely here on the southern outskirts that there's a significant concentration of private buildings. There is such a place in Primorsk. Now I'll show a satellite map, a satellite image of Primorsk itself, and you can see these locations, how many houses, private cottages there are here, and it's precisely these that the occupiers, as you can see, these are all houses, all private residences that the Russians are breaking into, and from this area they are trying to continue their assault on Stepnohirsk. Stepnohirsk is a very important location for them. The occupiers are constantly being driven out of here, along with their ambitions, so to speak, to capture Stepnohirsk. Stepnohirsk is important from the point of view that, well, let's mark Stepnohirsk so we can outline its boundaries as well. Stepnohirsk is an elevation from which, although here you don't even necessarily need to have the high ground to control certain locations. What's important is to have good positions to control those locations. Which locations can the Russians control from here, from Stepnohirsk? The first is Zaporizhzhia and its southern outskirts, which they can reach with their FPV drones. The second is the area of Komishuvaka and the highway that runs between Zaporizhzhia and Oskill. This highway here, the logistical connection, if you believe that there could be an offensive on Zaporizhzhia, its primary indicator would be an attempt to cut off logistics. Well, the main logistical arteries, just like now the Russians are approaching from the Lyman direction toward the Izium-Sloviansk highway to harass it with their FPV drones. In the same way, if they have real, genuine, not imaginary, not fake, not substituted, not deceptive ambitions to start something more or less large-scale in the territory of Zaporizhzhia region, then they first have to start working on the logistics. A marker of this would be, God forbid, the capture of Stepnohirsk and then further operations along the corresponding Orykiv-Zaporizhzhia highway. The fact that the Russians are currently increasing the number of troops here and redirecting additional reserves to this area is a fact. They are constantly moving, and their movements are being tracked by our resistance forces. For example, yesterday, Petro Andriushchenko, the head of the Center for the Study of Occupation, published this photo from the Mariupol resistance on his Telegram channel. This photo was taken, it's a screenshot from a video that was made in Berdyansk. What's special about it? First of all, it's the movement of military equipment taking place in Berdyansk. This is the occupied part of Zaporizhzhia region. And secondly, this equipment bears a previously unknown, discovered for the first time, mark, an identification sign on the equipment, yes. A sign, a tactical sign, as they're also called, which is applied to equipment when it comes to some offensive actions or something like that, and so on and so on. So this could be a certain kind of, sign. Although there are already a great many such signs that the Russians put on equipment in order to carry out various information operations. So does this mean that more active offensive actions might be launched in Zaporizhzhia? For now, it's too early to say. As of today, the fact is Lyman, a difficult situation, Kupiansk, a very difficult situation. In Donbass, we are awaiting the decisive battle for Donbass and hoping to improve our tactical position before this battle begins. That's how things are for us. Not exactly bad, but you can't say they're good either. That's the situation, friends. Thank you for your attention. Please like and leave your comments. Stay healthy. Subscribe to us. All the best and see you next time.